DangerDolan. So we've talked about WoW's expansion possibilities, the new races, the new continents, and the new classes, as well as whether or not the game is actually worth playing anymore. And it's now time to talk about the future of the actual game itself and the improvements that we, the player base, want to see. And there's going to be a new comment section at the end of this discussion with questions and thoughts from the community. So if you want to jump right to that, just click one of the links below this video, you'll go straight there. So now that Titan's been delayed, WoW's lifespan has actually been kind of extended as the industry's leading MMO. But with the genre stale and WoW rapidly aging, what could actually save the game at this point? One of the most compelling parts of this game comes from the end game progression. You can see this when you level up. You get that sense of exhilaration and excitement that, I've gotten from level 47 to 48. You also get it in dungeons and raids when you get some more gear, some better gear that makes you feel more powerful. So all of that is progression. You're making your character better. Lately though, the progression has actually started to sag. So you got LFR and you got challenge mode timers and then transmog sets you get from completing it. You got heroic dungeon with their low difficulty and crap rewards, and all the gear progression is focused on a single raid tier, which in this case is Throne of Thunder. See, if the game keeps going down this road, then the well of content will continue to dry up as soon as it appears due to overuse, which you can see in every raid tier we've had since Pandaria launched. What I want to see in the future of this game is alternate progression paths. Hardcore content for 5-man heroics that offer the same gear as normal and heroic mode raids. Just imagine if Blizzard were to scale all the old Noir bosses to 5-player difficulty and give them week-long lockouts. It'd be like a small-scale LFR, but with heroic difficulty for old content. So you're a small, elite, level 90 unit sent by the Bronze Dragon flight through the Caverns of Time to handle Wrath of the Lich King raids because of the Infinity Dragon, those time-traveling dragons with the weird eyes. And you get gear as a reward that only works in that 5-man raiding, just so it doesn't fuck with the 10 and 25 raid progression. I don't know about you, but I would love 5-man raiding, but they're not going to implement it, are they? Because that's a fun idea, and they don't exactly implement fun ideas anymore. They implement decent ideas. Pet battles. The progression from level 1 to 25 works fine, right? And I like that you have trainers every couple of levels to keep things interesting, and it is nice that they make you go out to the old raids to farm bosses for pets, but I think they can go one step further. You can have special phased versions of raid and dungeon environments for only pet battles. If you think about the difference between pet battles and Pokemon, there is a key issue of note. You don't have any trainer-filled buildings to level your pets in. You're stuck with piss easy open world wild battles which get old because there's no structure to them. In Pokemon, when you're wandering around, your objective is always to try to figure out a way to the next town to get the next gym badge. Whereas for pet battles, your objective is to mindlessly fly around the world fighting pets to level up so you can fight the next trainer. There are no puzzles involved, no potions or bikes. Your pets don't even evolve. If Blizzard were to say, fill an empty raid environment with trainers and puzzles like what you'd find in that Trove of the Thunder King scenario, you'd have immediate progression, wouldn't you? It wouldn't even require much work. You just add models and mechanics to an already complete environment and include mandatory trainer fights throughout. And then you get a big reward at the end. So you're walking through, you got your 3 level 25 pets, and then you run into a trainer, he turns around, he walks towards you and he says, ha ha ha, I'm going to fight you now. Then there's a flippy thing on the screen, pew doo 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 doo. So you go through the whole fight, and then you level up when you kill the other battle pet, and it'll be awesome. It'll be like a little mini game, but an actual game in Warcraft. I think it's a good idea. One last point, this one is about leveling. I wouldn't mind seeing some kind of a hard mode leveling, only because it's too easy to grind from 1 to 90. No idea how they would implement that. It's just that leveling is such a mindless joke at the moment, and I don't like the idea of an optional handicap for your character. but I wouldn't mind seeing some kind of alternate way to level for people who have done it like 8,000 times like most of us. One of the major issues in this game has to do with the repetition, overuse, and extreme accessibility of content. So kind of like when Blizzard discovered vehicle combat, LFR, it's currently being shoved in our faces, and we don't particularly want it that much. Vehicle combat, right? It worked when it was used sparingly during the solo quests when you're leveling to showcase a cool little interactive cinematic, like the infamous Badlands punch Deathwing in the face sequence. Likewise, LFR works for people unable to commit to raid schedules. But just as with the Argent tournament, if you keep force feeding someone a new flashiness, eventually they'll choke and they'll vomit and they'll die. The problem isn't that LFR exists or that the difficulty is too simplistic. I actually agree with the devs that matchmaking and high difficulty leads to bad things. It's that LFR is a part of the gearing progression. The paradigm has shifted from heroic dungeons to raids as a gear up mechanism. Let's review. You're gearing in raids to run raids. It's like driving around delivering pizzas and your reward is another car. I don't want another car. I want money for other things. Dungeons are money. LFR is a clown car with no wheels filled with dynamite. Currently, heroic scenarios and heroic dungeons are a bit of a joke. Compared to heroic raids, it's the difference between fighting a venomous, pissed off snake while people yell at you in a real life threatening duel atop a volcano, or mustering the strength to roll out of bed because you're a lazy shit. Raids are not the be all end all game changer of 2013, Blizzard seems to think they are. They're one part of MMOs. Sometimes I can't be bothered raiding. Sometimes I just want smaller content. Sometimes I don't want to invest in a big sprawling PS3 game. Sometimes I just want to dick around on the 3DS while I watch Becca on my 50-inch TV. Eventually, they need to realize that people like challenge in other aspects of their game, and they don't want to devote an entire nights progressing through raids. I want impossible dungeons. I want to grind said impossible dungeons so hard that I come away with blistered hands and the same gear as heroic raiders. Make it so. As for player housing, what I really want to see is not player housing. I want to see guild housing, but more elaborate. So let's discuss something unreasonable and will not be implemented because it would be too absurdly awesome. Your guild owns an airship and you can park it in any one zone on the planet. Say, Nagrand off the top of my head. Each ship has a hierarchy with its members ranging from captain to commander, lieutenant, and so on. The ship will be filled with trinkets from various achievements like a treasure from the Will of the Emperor if you cleared it on heroic mode, or the Skull of Gul'dan for killing Illidan. Each officer in the guild gets their own quarters with individual trophies based on the same achievements. You have access to auction houses, trade chat, ship to ship, cross-realm chat, and a lot of other cool shit. It'd be like taking the guild menu and implementing it as a real-world explorable area, like a Star Trek ship, but interactive and planted in a zone of your choosing because you're highest on the guild participation rating board or something. After reviewing what I just said, it's fucking stupid. I just want to ride airships. The number one thing I want to see in WoW in the future is not actually in WoW at all. Now that the well of lore has started to dry up, what I'd suggest is bringing out a Warcraft 4 RTS, or at the very least start working on it now. If Blizzard were to release trailers and so forth for it, they could set it like a few years ahead of Pandaria, just show a completely overhauled Azeroth with advanced technology or post-apocalyptic, something completely left field. That way, instead of tumbling down a mountain as WoW is currently doing in the lore, the story would be aiming towards something. The next couple of expansions could be like a prologue to the new chapter in Warcraft, showing everything that happens leading up to the new RTS. Then, when the new RTS comes out, they start work on a new WoW type MMO set in the new next Warcraft world with a new engine, and just go from there. If they are set on making a Titan MMO though, just release the RTS alongside WoW and let it continue the story. If there's anything WoW needs right now, it's a revamped lore. Now we turn to the community and their comments for this section. So what happened is, usually I make these discussion videos about a certain topic, which is what I just did, and now I'm going to get some comments from other YouTubers about what they would want to see in the future of WoW. I bring it up, I discuss it, then we move on. And I'm going to do this for 10 questions, because if I did it for every question I received, I'd be here all day. So here we go. First comment from Ian Halcombe. The biggest thing I would like Blizzard to do would be to bring players back into the in-game world instead of being able to stay in a city for the majority of your toon's capped life. LFG, LFR, Arena and BG queues can be used anywhere in-game, which removes the incentive to leave your capital city's bank/auction house. I won't act like I know how to bring us back into the world or if anyone actually wants to. I'm just interested in your opinion on this subject. So I chewed over this one for a while, and the question I keep coming back to is, what's the point in incentivizing level cap world content? I'm not saying we shouldn't, or that there's no way to do so, but I want you to think about why exactly it is we should retread the same content in environments shared by low level questing. If we break down the issue to its core, you'll find the true question to be, what's the point of logging in if all we use is chat, the auction house, and menus to navigate endgame matchmaking? What's the point in an MMO if we have a clear and defined divergence between leveling in world content and menu-oriented endgame? As far as I'm concerned, world content is for solo players and endgame is for groups of players. I don't necessarily want to go back out into the world simply because I don't see the point. Still though, a couple of ways to do so would be: 1. You remove the flying mounts, as in the Throne of Thunder, Pandaria 85 to 90. This will increase the length of time in the world, and it may provide a little bit of incentive to actually explore. I know that when I was leveling from 85 to 90, I was actually exploring a lot more than I am now. And 2, you have your world mini-bosses, and they worked really well, especially when they dropped these useful blue items like the increased swim speed booster or experience bonus for your ults. Although they need to offer a token system like Valor Points, but only for mini boss items, so I save up enough of this little artifact thing that they drop, and then I can turn them all in for the experience boost for ults trinket, because that seems fair instead of relying on RNG all the time. Question 2 from Genesis Xerox. I would like to see 5-mans have more involvement later down the line in raiding progression, as well as a difficulty increase outside of challenge modes. Such involvement could include doing specific 5-mans with hard mode triggers, Alduar style, that would augment pieces of gear, much like how Thunderforge is right now, minus the RNG on when it happens. Gives a reason for players to go back and do them with purpose. Your thoughts on making 5-mans more meaningful and or ideas based on my example? I'm not overly sure about triggers for matchmaking groups. Also, making it reward better loot would force every group to turn it on. You're better off just giving a difficulty option before you join the dungeon. So progression for 5-man raid style dungeons with week-long lockouts, that would work, but they should reward gear that doesn't function in 10-man raids, i.e. kept separately to avoid overlap with current raid tiers. If not 5-man only gear, then either each 5-man must be clearable in one go, like easy or not normal mode type difficulty, or they must have some sort of matchmaking simply because they will interfere with 10 and 25-man raid schedules. The great thing about 5-man progression would be the ease of gathering groups and, more importantly, instead of the 12 boss raid tiers, you have a dungeon with only 3 or 4 bosses. Feasibly, you can focus on one dungeon per week, and you wouldn't be running the same one week in, week out. Cough, Throne of Thunder, cough, with the same difficulty and loot as 10-mans. You keep heroics as they are now, but rename them as something else. And as mentioned earlier, it would be cool to redo old content as 5-man raids like Alduar or Karazhan. You got the same art assets, the same boss models, same everything, but you just retune the mechanics. And considering how much work Blizzard has put into pet battles, Brawlers Guild, world content, scenarios, you'd think they'd have the time to work on 5-man progression. Maybe one day we'll see it, and I ideally hope so. Next comment from Mr. Fucking Sunshine. Here is the number one thing I don't like about Mr. Pandaria. WoW is an MMORPG. Emphasis on the RPG part. The cool thing about RPGs has always been creating a character that was an extension of yourself, and going on an adventure in an incredible, fantastic world. Pandaria is so far removed from Warcraft lore that inspired WoW in the first place that it feels like another MMO altogether sometimes. Characters and storylines that I would love to participate in are nowhere to be seen. See, the problem stems from the lack of precedence. If pandas hadn't been hinted at in the previous games, the reception would have been much more negative. The Pandaria itself is extremely generic, and the storylines were difficult to keep track of. We're so used to seeing our own races established in Azeroth and Outland, to suddenly appear on a landmass where pretty much all you see is pandas? That's disconcerting. So you go from, we gotta kill Illidan and the demons, to, we gotta kill the undead and the Lich King, to, we gotta kill Deathwing and the Black Dragonflight, to, we gotta get rid of some black stuff in Pandaland. It's a bit anticlimactic, don't you think? I don't even know what raid bosses we're fighting anymore. Like, who was Grand Emperor Shekzir? Why are we fighting in the Terrace of the Endless Spring? What exactly did the Thunder King do that warranted us charging into his island and murdering him in the face? I don't know. That's the thing. None of us know what we're doing anymore because it hasn't been established properly. We have to do a lot of supplementary reading and viewing of trailers and movies and shit. It's annoying. It's actually annoying. Nothing you can do about it. It's just stupid, and they never should have made Mr. Pandaria. That's just my thoughts. Next question from the one, the fantastic, and the lovely Superfry. I would love to see an open dungeon that is open to one faction at a time, but lets anyone stay in if the other faction gains control for lulz and world PvP thingies. You could have bosses, you could have vendors that like currency dropped by the dungeon's minions in different quality. It's a blatant ripoff from Dark Age of Camelot, of course. Also, I'd like to have weekly events that just happen all over the place, like collect X boobies from harpies and deliver them to the lustful goblin little person raising hands. Okay, so aside from the fact that it's a very similar concept to Barrett Hold, I do like the idea of cross-faction dungeon attacks. So it's like challenge mode timers, but instead of a timer, it's a race to clear the dungeon before the other faction clobbers you to death. And this also relates to a previous comment about getting us back out into the world. The Baron's idea was nice, and I'd like to see more of that. Though you wouldn't want to run into the issue of archaeology circles where people ignore 90% of the world, fly directly to their goal, land, quickly do the thing, then hearth back to the capital city. What would be fun to see is you reach a zone, then the quest says, go do it, go look around, find out what you gotta do, because I'm not handing the objective to you. So you gotta explore on foot and look for like lost objects that do not show up on the minimap. So you add a few level 90 elite mobs and baby, you got a stew going. Next question, Stale Pork, who has added me in WoW. Good on you, Stale Pork. I think we've done a few scenarios. Cool guy. Do you see Blizzard creating more class quests, or was the Warlock chain for Greenfire a once-off? Something I'd really want to see is hunters getting their quivers back, purely for cosmetics, but I'm not entirely sure how or if they would implement this. So I've never been a huge fan of class-only quests and challenges. If you're going to spend all the time building story and content, it should be for all players, not just one minority. They should, at the very least, make a class-only quest, but then open it up to the next class each week. So one week it's just for Warlocks, the next you include mages, and then hunters, and so on. So it'd be difficult to structure class-only quests for multi-role spec classes like monks or druids. Either you scale the challenge to coincide with these different roles, like instead of killing the boss, you heal into full, like Sulong, and then you protect a bunch of NPCs in your tanking spec, or you base it all in one spec like Brawly shit, which gives the finger to healers and tanks. And unless you give a progression incentive at the end like a piece of gear, only people interested in cosmetics will do it. And that's a lot of effort on new content wasted simply because you want a small appearance change. It's also annoying for other players to hear about how challenging the final boss in the Warlock Greenfire quest chain is, at least for me it is, and we're all stuck doing these piss easy dungeons and scenarios and rage each week and day. If you put in challenging content, make it for groups, not solo players. Holy crap. because I'm sick of hearing how challenging that Greenfire last boss is, and me being like, I want to fight him. Why can I not fight him? Why am I stuck doing this easy as fuck shit? Fucking tits on a leaf. That's all I got to say. Next question, am I cool yet? I want to see them focus more on dungeons, raids, PvP, and the social experience as much as they can. Fuck questing. It's alright the first go around, but after that it's just a tedious grind and it can drag on forever. Fuck dailies. Just fuck dailies. And I feel as though they need to make more things optional. Still appealing, but optional. I shouldn't have to do LFR in order to raid with my guild. And I shouldn't have to do dailies in order to do LFR. It is a stupid system. It is a stupid system, isn't it? Luckily, dailies are not mandatory anymore, like, whatsoever. Weekly quests, such as the one for the Barons, is acceptable since you can do it at your own pace, and it awards the lesser charms you need for the bonus gear. And now they're removing the rep requirements for welfare gear, although why anyone would be retarded enough to waste valor points on anything lower than 522 or item upgrades is beyond me. I totally agree with focusing more on dungeons and PvP, raids not so much, they're already doing that. And I don't really feel like they've nailed the social experience. I remember when they implemented global chat, and I loved it. And then they took it away because apparently people abused it for jokes and random shit. Kind of true. The thing is though, I didn't want them to take it away. The reason a lot of people hang around in major cities is not only for the convenience, but also for trade chat, since it's like the only place you might see a conversation outside of guilds anymore. I like the idea of optional content like achievements and pet battles, but it's when something becomes mandatory that it gets thrown on stage and told to act. If it can't act or dance or do anything but stumble around like a drunk chuckle fuck, then we boo it off. Right now, the mandatory tasks in the gearing process revolve around a heroic scenario daily, LFR week in and week out, and the only alternative to that is that you must commit to a raid team and then still find a way to valor cap. I saw nothing wrong with the heroic dungeon dailies from Cataclysm. What would have been nicer to see is a combined random dungeon, scenario, and LFR finder. So instead of doing the same thing every day, you have the chance of doing a 5.0 dungeon, or a heroic scenario, or one wing from LFR. To me, that seems like a reasonable compromise. Next question, Pixelbat. WoW has gotten so complicated. This is why it's falling apart in my opinion. Has it gotten complicated though? If you look at all the content added through expansions, very little of it survives for the next one. I'll admit, certain parts of it have gotten bloated, like achievement lists, how many mounts are in the game now, or gear and transmog variations. But WoW has been quite complicated from the start. Learning the class rotations, gemming, reforging, enchanting, boss fight mechanics, and even learning the acronyms for dungeons, raids, and conversation in general. I had a hard time getting into this game. Like, I was 13 when I started. I don't know what the fuck was going on. I remember I got to Thunderbluff, and then I got the message in the general chat, Thunderbluff is under attack. I typed /yell, do we all go back to Thunderbluff to defend it? Nobody answered me because I'm a fucking retard. But still, if anything, the game is more accessible now than it's ever been due to the linear questing experience and the simplistic dungeon and raid modes. If we're talking about why WoW is falling apart, it's for two reasons, and I know everything. The most prominent being that the game is 8 years old. The game is still fresh, exciting, but people just want something else now, which isn't unreasonable. Another being the absurd easiness and accessibility of content now. LFR is great for people with little time, but it also murders the desire to progress since there's nothing new to shoot for. People like Superman because he's an icon. He shows the best traits of humanity. Can you imagine what a clusterfuck our planet would be if every Joe Nobody had superpowers? Because LFR gives everyone superpowers, and there's nothing left to shoot for. Next question, Alcest9870. As for Dream implementation, every class has a tank or healer spec. I honestly believe this will get more people to play tank or healer because they'll eventually want to try it out. The problem is they can barely balance the current 34 specs, so making 44 total would be hell. Still, it'd be something interesting to try out. I'd love to be a healing mage that heals by turning back time. Arcane spec. I'm not entirely sure adding more tank and healer specs will solve the problem though. If we learned anything from the DK, it's that just because a new shiny easy to level class is introduced, people won't necessarily shift their interest from DPS to tank. In fact, I'm convinced there's nothing you can do. Either you want to play as a tank, or a DPS, or a healer. You can add as many glowing neon arrows pointing to tank spec as you want, but the fact remains either you really want a tank, or you really want to heal. And you got plenty of class choices to do this with. As for adding more role specs to DPS only classes, I'd say go for it. If I were a class designer at Blizzard and suddenly decided that for the next expansion, we'd like to have an additional spec for every class. First of all, I'd make Warlock and Hunter classes have a pet tanking spec. I'd implement the system. And also like the idea of the healing mage, but who else is it appropriate for? I mean, DKs can only heal undead units, right? Hunters and Warlocks, obviously they'd be the tanking classes. Warriors and Rogues, which is the only classes that are left that don't have healing specs, they would be limited to like bandage type situations, or like the Mistweaver Monk, right? Some sort of melee attack with healing side effects, like the rogue places marks on other party members, and based on his damage, the more they get healed. For balance, I wouldn't say it'd be hell. Like, they've even said themselves their company is growing all the time. It wouldn't be beyond the realm of possibility they'd have more additional guys on board to help balance the new specs, especially if they don't add another class next expansion. New comment from Epic Sandwich 24. Hey, the DD Guides, am new to the world of Warcraft and I own MOP. Will having all the expansions ruin all the history to WoW for me? And also, will it be hard for me to learn about the game? Now, I've combined this question, not really a question, it is a comment, with another comment because they're so relevant and I wanted to get both of these guys. So, go on here from the Pete that just says, I'd like Blizzard to start up fresh vanilla WoW servers and slowly progress through the different expansions. Please DD deliver for me. Okay, so if you're new to WoW, new to the lore, I highly recommend playing through at least Warcraft 3. Warcraft 2 helps, but it isn't like necessary. It's kind of like the Metal Gear 1 and 2 to Metal Gear Solid. You don't have to play the first two to understand the 3D mega ultra cool one. As for lore stretching from vanilla to mists, that's not so simple. You'll have to have plenty of old lore videos out there, like OMFG Kata did some, Noble87 does a lot of lore stuff, but only based on like certain characters. And there's not much in the way of catch-up videos for the new person. You could always check out Wowpedia and just do reading on what subject interests you, like what happened to Illidan or Arthas. Or you could go through all the trailers for every patch, which is usually what plays on the back of my videos, and they typically convey a lot of neat info on stuff you've missed. Maybe I could do a catch-up video one day, but only if I were able to do it in the lead up to the next expansion, so say a year from now. On a side note though, it's not overly necessary to know WoW's story that much. A lot of it is just individual stories that play out over quests and cutscenes, and not one long overarching story in the vein of Warcraft 3. I mean, even I don't know 90% of who the fuck these characters are in Pandaria, so just play Warcraft 3 and check Wowpedia if something interests you. Also keep your eyes peeled for the official novels, since they contain a lot more canon story than you traditionally find in these game-based books. And I highly doubt they'll release service for old content. The Pete, since it's horribly outdated at this point, trust me, you didn't miss much. I wish they'd at least reuse some of the art assets for the older raids though. Second last question from Gene Collips. Yeah. What do you think about damage suppression and balance with heal pools for the future of this game? I've already seen a crazy inflation and difficulty balancing stats made specifically for PvP. Has any other MMO ever done that before? And unless Blizzard is okay with 2 million health pool mages, they're gonna have to do something about this soon. I think numbers shouldn't have increased at all. When BC was released and suddenly all the gear jumped up to ludicrous numbers, that should have been the giveaway right there. Seeing the DPS numbers in the 100,000s is just fucking absurd. If we kept roughly the same amounts, but increased them incrementally during the expansion launch instead of jumping them up for no apparent reason, we would have been fine. But now, 4 expansions later, I can't read all this shit bouncing around my screen. At the very least, we should round out numbers to be like 4,300 DPS is now 4.300 DPS. That way we can drop the last few numbers and go on with sane amounts. On the topic of balancing the game for PvE and PvP with the same stats and gear, honestly, they should just remove the similarity. Give PvP gear their own hierarchy and rules instead of constantly messing with their PvE counterparts. I mean, who cares if the PvP gear is slightly usable in dungeons and raids? Would it be a huge loss, a huge, tremendous, game-breaking loss to make PvP gear unusable in group PvE content? Fuck, I hate saying that acronym so much. And now, last question from Antonio Hernandez, who, after I think 2 Q&As in which I've mentioned, please don't structure your comments in a one after the other kind of format, has structured them in the one after the other format. So, I wasn't going to answer this question, but since I ran short, screw it, I'll just answer it. What he wants for the future of WoW is as follows. Change the talent system back to the way it used to be. Talents are fine, as they are. Just, I wish they would give them more weight. Focus on the Burning Legion, Queen of Jara, etc. It'd actually be nice to get away from Pandaria for once. That'd be cool, because I'm sick of this landmass we have right now. Increase difficulty of 5-man heroics, absolutely, but only if it's separate from our current matchmaking system. And please, for the love of God, rename heroic dungeons to something else. Raid progression similar to BC style, don't really agree. It means everyone gets left behind if they're in the top guilds. Massive problems, guild poaching off each other. It kind of worked with LFR now, but still kind of cruel to the newcomers looking to get into normal mode raiding and being stuck in like 5.0 raids. That'd be, no thanks. Your suggestion about LFR, removing loot and making it a way to see content, yes indeedy. More world PvP events, world raid bosses, world events, blah blah blah, something about Guild Wars 2. So there's a few of these already, but I wouldn't mind seeing more events like the Kiraj opening, which was chaotic and ridiculous. Instead of these big, boring, controlled events like the seasonal things, the Christmas nonsense and all that, they're not that good. So that's it for this week, guys. I'll hopefully get these things done weekly, but I wouldn't count on it. Usually a week passes and then I get hard at it. So it'll be between 1 week and 2 weeks that I'll have these discussions / Q&A / commenty whatever videos come out. Now the topic for the next video shall be, what was your favorite WoW expansion? Was it Vanilla WoW? Was it BC? Wrath of the Lich King? Cataclysm? Or currently Mists? Is Mists your favorite? Do you love the pandas? Do you hate the pandas? Did you love killing the Lich King, watching him crumble and then say something to his dad and then pass out and then die? For me personally, you'll find out my thoughts on the next video. And yes, Vanilla WoW was technically an expansion. If you were there for the original launch, that is your expansion, that can be the thing you love the most out of all the expansions. So just don't bring it up in comments saying, who knew Vanilla WoW wasn't an expansion? Because we all know, okay? And before anyone asks, I am hopefully going to get those new raid boss guides done, but I don't know how or when, or if it's going to be just before the actual patch launches, but we'll see. So that's it for today, guys. I'll be back very soon. Have a good one.